Lauren, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling much better today.
Wonderful. It's good. Alfred shared with me a little bit that you were not feeling well, so we're praying for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, who is missing? Do we have somebody missing? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we are in. All right. Mark needs no introduction. Over to you.
All right, that was quick, quick and easy. So good morning and welcome. um, Today we're going to step into a conversation about a core component of professional practice in chaplaincy, which is reflection. And knowing your educator, I assume you have been talking about reflection already. Is that correct? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Um, Reflection isn't just something we do when we have extra time. It's how we grow, how we deepen our self-awareness, and how we continue to develop as a spiritual care professionals, whether in real time or after the fact. Reflection helps us to connect experiences with insight and insight with a purpose. So, in our time together, we'll explore how reflection shows up in professional theory, in scripture, and in real life chaplaincy practice. I have a couple of sources that I've been reading on, Donald Shawn and Joan Dewey. So we're going to look into what they have shared with the world through their writing and think how reflection forms us. So before we begin all this, I invite you to take a moment to remove whatever distractions you might have, um, whether it's the phone or extra browser tab. Um, we're joining virtually, so it's hard to be fully present when we're not in a room together, but as much as possible, let's be fully present with one another over this time. And let's engage, whether it's through question, conversation, sharing insights in the chat, however you would like to participate. I would like for you to be present and participate. And to begin, really, I'd like to start with a biblical foundation for reflection. Let's start with the scripture. In Luke chapter 2, verse 19, we can read about Mary. And when Jesus was born, the shepherds came to visit. Everyone was talking, praising, celebrating. But Luke really highlights something very important. In chapter 2, verse 19, it says, "But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart." So that word pondered in Greek, symbolousa, means to bring things together, to hold multiple truths side by side in search for meaning. She didn't rush to interpret or explain. She took time to reflect, held the mystery of what happened, and let it speak to her heart. What is something in your practice or life right now that you feel invited to treasure, to ponder, rather than to resolve? I can repeat that question. What is something in your practice or in your life currently that you feel invited to treasure, to ponder, rather than to find a solution? And maybe it's in your professional practice as a chaplain. And you know what we're doing right now? All of you, you're reflecting. I invite you to unmute your phone, unmute your microphone so we can have a conversation.
Oh, I was thinking actually, can I go and say something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, when you made that question, I'm like, okay, what came to my mind is how can I not how can I, yes, maybe how can I bring compassionate heart to the patients? And that's the area I was kind of thinking about when you made that kind of a question. And because as much as we are professionals, we want to be very professional when we go to these rooms. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we are human beings and we can meet the patients where they are at that point and show that compassionate. That's what I was kind of thinking, and I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, I appreciate that.
One thing that like I'm looking at as I'm visiting with patients, and one thing I kind of cherish and want to hang on to is the time I spend with different families or the time I spend with our staff members, where we're visiting and they're talking to me and telling me what's going on and just being a listening ear for some people who just need that at that time. Giving them the cliche of a place to feel safe and be heard, and just being that person for them within the hospital.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Maybe one more and we'll move on.
So you put two words together, treasure and ponder.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the things that I ponder are not the things I treasure. They're the things that...
Except if they're grandkids, right?
Oh, now grandkids, yeah. Those I treasure. They don't give me much time to ponder, though.
Yeah.
No, sometimes what I ponder are, what should I have done differently, or why did this happen, or I don't want to say negative as much as things I don't understand or have trouble accepting. Things that I treasure, yeah, I go back and think about them, but I don't know if ponder is the right word. It's just accepting that they were great things that happened.
Yeah.
And it's something I ponder too, or as you said, that is, looking at basically miracles that go on in these hospitals when you're in an ICU and someone comes in and everyone's going, they're not walking out of here, and next thing, yes, they are. Just pondering the power of God in the healing of our patients.
As I was preparing for this didactic, I read a little bit of Donald Shawn, and Shawn was a philosopher and educator at MIT who studied how professionals think and grow, not in the classroom but in the field. And so he wrote a book, Reflective Practitioner: How Professionals Think in Action, in 1983. And he introduced two big ideas that can help us understand how we grow in real time: reflection and action. This is when you are in the middle of an encounter and, you adjust, you approach instinctively, but with awareness. And the example, I was fortunate to do a reflection yesterday for our weekly check-in. And one of the things that happened to me recently when I was able to reflect in action was just my interaction with my son. He's 11 years old and he's starting to push the wrong buttons in me, patience and all those things. And oftentimes, he would delay a response to whatever we ask of him, to a point where it drives us crazy. So he refused to or delayed cleaning the basement where he plays the game, video games. And so his mom got, raised her voice, and it got me to a point where I held him by the hand very firmly, and I wanted to just take him to the basement and just show him how bad it looks. Well, when I held his hand with the strength of being angry, I caught a glimpse of him looking at me with a lot of fear, and the fear that, I was punished as a kid, and sometimes you deserve it, and sometimes you're just afraid, and that was the fear that I saw in his eyes. And I'm just thankful for reflection in that moment, where from taking it, escalating it any further that I could escalate it, by the time we got to the basement, we're in the middle of, when we were halfway, I set him down on the stairway, and I sit down. I said, Christian, I'm just very angry right now, and that's why I act this way. But I'm angry at this and this and this, and I don't want to punish you in any way. I just want us to talk. And that was I think that had more learning there for him than if I was just to punish him in whatever physical way or emotional way, which I'm sure both would be there. That was the example for me of reflection in action, just very recent. But Sean writes, when someone reflects in action, he becomes a researcher in the practice context. You're experimenting, you're learning, you're adapting to a situation, not after the fact, but in the moment. So that's where, when we reflect in action, we can ask ourselves, what just happened? What did I feel, think, or miss? What I will carry on, forward. So I guess the question for our discussion would be is, can you think of a moment recently where you adjusted your approach in the moment? And what guided that shift?
Well, I can speak to that.
Sure.
Yesterday morning, I was done med-surg 1 at Glen Oaks, and I had to check in on a consult. It turns out the patient was out for an EGD, so she wasn't in her room. So I found the nurse just to validate that we knew where the patient was and when she'd be back. And when I was done checking in with the nurse about the patient who was gone, she said, "Could you go see the family in 13?" I said, "Well, yeah, I noticed that there was a couple of guys standing around the bed of a very frail looking woman in there." And she said, "Yeah, she's pretty well full of cancer, and she's going for a paracentesis today, and they've got her full code, and I don't know that like we need to really get the husband and the son thinking along the lines of a DNR just to be compassionate to this woman, because even if we were to restart her heart, she's just going to linger. So I said, okay, I'll go talk to them. She said, oh, by the way, that conversation has already been started. They told Dr. Fariki that they wanted her full code. I said, okay. So I went in, and I mean, this is not an unusual kind of situation for me in terms of needing to bring up the difficult subject of goals of care. But I went in and prayed with them. They're Catholic. And while we were praying, the woman started crying out in pain. And the husband just went to her side and started telling her that she needed to stay with them, that she needed to fight, and that the procedure later that day is going to make her feel better, and help her to get better. And I realized in the moment that trying to bring up the goals of care idea would have just sown emotional chaos in the room in the moment. And so I pivoted, and we finished the prayer, and I wished them well, and told them that we'd be looking in on them after the procedure, and then placed the patient's case into a shared folder that Paul and I work out of jointly, just so that we'd be able to easily find her again. Because I could tell that the husband in particular was in that moment in no condition at all to hear the idea that his wife might not survive, or that or that her heart might stop later that day. And it just, we want to be able to move them into a place where they are where they don't have any regrets over the care that they're giving. And so went in with the idea of talking to them about DNR, and ended up not doing it because of the mid-conversational assessment.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing, Daniel. This is a good example how we can, in the moment, pivot based on the situation. Another writing that I wanted to share with you just briefly is from John Dewey, one of the foundational voices in experiential learning. And he was a philosopher, educator in the early 20th century who challenged the idea that we grow just by doing. His core idea was that we do not learn from the experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. Dewey argued that experience alone doesn't change us. What matters is how we think about what we experience. And in chaplaincy, we have, hundreds of encounters. But unless we reflect, we may not grow from them. Dr. Hagen, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was going to say, otherwise you keep doing the same thing wrong over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So maybe there's a patient encounter with any of you that stayed with you, but you haven't taken the time to reflect on it maybe, or you started to reflect on it, but it still sort of lingers. If you have something like that, what is the learning here? What is the learning outcome here? What is it trying to teach you?
Mark, when you say about reflection, I was thinking about that. For example, as a CPE student or as a chaplain, I have been learning that reflection is very so much important. Why? In my understand, because uh, it's helped me understand my feelings, my actions, and how can grow or can do better next time. If it's necessary, of course. But and about I say, Mark, I see what I did well, or when what I can do better, better next time, right?
Mhm.
And then it helped me give better care to patients or their family or staffs, and I can become a better chaplain when I use that reflection.
Mhm.
So very important my experience as a CPE student or as a chaplain, Mark.
Yeah. And I think the wonderful thing that um, clinical pastoral education gives us as one of the offerings is that model: action, reflection, action model, right? Where we engage in whatever it is that we do, and then we can step back, whether in the moment or after the fact, and just ask the question, what just happened? How did I respond to it? What made me, you know, what stirred me, whether it's a positive or a negative emotion? And then based on that, based on the outcome of that reflection, being able to act again. And that's exactly what you said, Dr. Hagen. It avoids the autopilot of doing hundreds of encounters as a chaplain and doing the same thing over and over again.
So one of the reflections I had, I've looked at body language, my body language when I'm with patients. I've had experiences where I've noticed that giving off the wrong message by the way I'm standing and talking to someone. And I had one encounter in particular where it was a little old woman. It was her daughter and I were there with her, and we're discussing the fact that she wouldn't eat, and we're talking. And when I was standing next to the bed, I leaned up a bit and I looked at the woman's face, and she became frightened when I leaned. So I immediately leaned back, but it's one of those faces that just, it broke my heart that I scared this woman while I was talking to her. And I was like, because I was like, well, you have to. And she just looked so frightened of me. And I apologized, and we continued to talk, and she was fine once I backed up, but it was one of those things I reflect on it, and I'm always very careful. And it was something I would do, like talking to my mom, because we're at the table. I lean up, and we're sitting in it, and I realized I can't do that. I cannot do that at the hospital because I frighten people.
Mhm.
So that's something that an experience that I reflected on, and it totally changed when I'm speaking to someone, where I'm standing, how I'm leaning. Um, and I've also had another experience where I was standing with my hands on my hips. And it's not a good chaplain look of, yeah, whatever.
Who is the
And I
boss here,
realized,
right?
yeah, I was like, are you kidding me? So I learned, and that's a habit of mine, because I'll be standing here, when we have friends over and I come out of the kitchen and I'm talking and and I'm like, whoa. So I've learned to keep the hands off the hips when I'm talking to people, because that's not a, yeah, I'm listening to you look. So
Yeah.
I besides what I'm speaking, I try to watch my body language after
It's
reflecting.
Yeah, I appreciate Mary. With the little time that we have left, a couple of things that I wanted to share with you was that, for chaplains, our reflection isn't just emotional or clinical, it's also spiritual. And so asking for God in the moment, how does this encounter challenges my beliefs? I think it's important to be mindful of that. And I think, I know you guys do that, but what's more important to me, no, it shouldn't sound it this way, not more important, where I see myself, what I see myself doing more sometimes, or falling into the pit of things that I should avoid while reflecting. Do you have those things that you know that you should not go into while reflecting? I'll give you an example. Assumptions is one of the big things for me that I have to watch in my life. How to stay away from assuming. And assuming is very easy, even in the reflection, process. I'm curious if you guys have anything that you are aware to stay away from while going through a reflection process.
Oh yeah. So I know I do this, and it's hard to stop. My spiritual director has told me to stop doing it, and that's I ruminate. I go back over things over and over again. Why this? Oh, I should, and come up with these scenarios of I should have said this. I should have done that. And I just can't let it go. And I should. So
I appreciate it.
I sometimes and have to be careful with what especially when you go for when you go for confessions. Someone is hurting, is in a hospital settings. We have the word I'm failing to pronounce the word, but the people,
scrupulous.
yes,
Scrupulous.
it's scrupulous. That's the word I was looking for to pronounce it. Yeah, so it's always when I go, I'm like, no, you are not the one doing this. Just allow the person to be where he or she is now, without you moving in there with your theological thinking. This is not a sin. Why are you not confessing your own sin? You're confessing the sins of your husband. So it's all those kind of things which I have to block myself and say, okay, I have to deal with this the way it is, and yeah. So it's assuming it's a good word that sometimes I make that too. So I have to be careful.
Yeah. Confessing the sins of my wife would be so much easier than confessing my own sins.
Yes, yes.
Her wrongdoing, not mine. I appreciate it, Father Lauren. In summary, what reflection forms in us? And thinking about that, I would say, in my experience, and you feel free to add to the list. To begin with, it's self-awareness, recognizing how we show up. It's emotional intelligence, noticing what others need And we've demonstrated that through today's conversation. It raises an ethical maturity, making wise, compassionate choices. It creates resilience, processing pain so that it doesn't paralyze us. And it gives vocational clarity, understanding who I am, what I do, and why I do what I do. I've heard it from CP educators before, as a chaplain's formation is never finished. Reflection is the bridge between our calling and what we're becoming. We welcome any closing thoughts. If there's anything that you would add to the list, why reflection would be important.
Reflection helps us grow. So if you don't reflect on what you did, what went right, what went wrong, you just monotonous, you're just getting monotonous, do the same thing, go in, do the same thing, whether it's right or wrong, if you're, being helpful or not, you just go in and do the same thing, unless you take that time to reflect and go, what happened there? What happened? Did that go well? Did that go wrong? Or, and like Colleen said, you don't want to just keep hashing it over and over, but you do need that moment to look at each encounter and go, did that go right? And if not, why not? And if it did, okay, I'll do that again.
Yep. I'll end here with the quote from John Dewey. Once again, just something for us to take home. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. And so with that, I just want to say thank you for spending time with me, for our little time together. And I think you have a full day ahead of learning, continuous learning.
Thank you very much, Mark, for blessing us with this information. And if I were to give a summary, tying in with some other things that the team has learned or the group has learned, you have brought many aspects together. And in your last 3 minutes, you brought in also the aspect of how this practice enhances self-awareness and enhances awareness of the other. And when the two grow, then we become even more effective. And also, one of the major points, we don't learn from the experience and taking the experience as an event, but unless we experience it as a verb, experiencing, and then in the experiencing, we'll have the opportunity to do in-depth reflection. Then we grow. Finally, what I felt also was a reminder to the group about one of the important things that we normally come back to, and that is self-supervision. And if you lack self-supervision, then there won't be growth. Why did I do what I did? Why did I do or why didn't I do what, and so on. Supervision, is this what a chaplain does? Or I am out my realm as a chaplain? So you brought all these things together into this presentation. And I just want to thank you for making it so easy and so plain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alfred, and thank you, everyone. Hope you guys have a good day, rest of the day.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, we will
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
we will